a nice kind of touch to it. But you know, I mean, I think it would look pretty cool, and it might solve some of that visual thing that you're talking about. But I did find a picture of what it looked like with the cherry blossom and stuff. But like I said, it's just, I mean, I assume they were alive cherry blossoms. And I asked Alan about, he hadn't even done anything. Oh, yeah.
See, when I look here, this always looks to me.
Doing everything. Let me see if I showed. Well, so that's the question. I think it was because it was like, you know. It just was like one of those videos that popped up with other videos. Yeah, no, they won't be thrilled. Won't be thrilled about that. But that's what I think. If you had something that was sort of more, you know, vertical as opposed to taking up a lot of space, would be nice.
So you're not gonna have a chair there anymore?
No, I think basically the chair scenario is really for there. But the truth is that the number of
I like them.
the red chairs, no, they still exist. They're just downstairs in the library. They're library chairs now. They're just not Bema chairs. They were never really functional on this space anyway because of their size. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it would be a bad idea, but
You have to know where you sit when somebody's holding the car.
well, so that again, in my experience so far, it hasn't been too much of a problem because we have these chairs right here, and you just basically pull them right over there. And 90% of the time, it's me doing that anyway, and I just, you know, lift it and put it back down again. So it's not the end of the world as far as these things are concerned. But you know,
Those red chairs.
well, again, they're not gone. They're very much downstairs. They're they're right downstairs. But you know, hopefully people will use that library, and then when they want to use that library, they'll. I think you know the ones that are coming to study. Well, that's one of the things we have to work on. You know, we used to years ago. Well, you know, but again, in a space like this, the idea that anybody gets everything that they want and doesn't get the things that they don't want is a bit far fetched. You know, I think.
You sound like you should be talking to the Congress of the United States.
I think you know. Look, if I had another life to live and I could tolerate the tumult of it all, I probably could have done okay in you know politics. I feel like it seems like 90% of it is just being able to stand up in front of a room full of people and talk. At least I know I can do that much. You know, and I have actually it was really lovely. I got a picture from our friend Bridget Fleming right before the end of her term. She invited me just to say thanks very much to Gail who kept up with it so that I could actually do it. And so they invited me to give the invocation at the Suffolk County Legislature, and they sent this really great picture of me standing there looking rather rabbinic. But I still to this moment I really have no idea what an invocation is. So I just talked for a few minutes and they gave me a microphone, and then you know, and that was the end of it. But it was very sweet to me. No, it was really nice. No, she's a fabulous person. But I think that's the challenge of term limits is that you want them in place for everybody that you don't like, and then you want to keep people around forever who you love. And unfortunately, that was so much. And oh yeah, very much, very much. And and really, if you talk to her about it, she was very happy to do it, and her whole team was really very lovely. They, you know.
You really don't know what an invocation is?
It's
asking God to come and make them do the right thing.
well, so that was so I went about it on the assumption that I had a couple of minutes to teach something. So what I taught them is a very classic piece of the Talmud where you have, and you know, a little bit of foreshadowing for evening's discussion later. Two very famous rabbis, Hillel and Shammai, and they become the heads of these two academies of the era. And it's of a period of time for the rabbis where it's known as, in Hebrew, the Zugot period. Zugot, I'm just looking to make sure I keep time, is Zug is a pair. So there was a sort of series of generations where you had two dominant rabbis, and they basically would argue over matters of law and whatever it was. In this case, I don't know if you remember I think they still play the Harlem Globetrotters, right? And they would play against this one team called the Washington Generals. And so they would, you know, Globetrotters would win 99% of the time, but every once in a while, you know, Washington Wizards would win one. So that was Shammai. He won basically like one argument out of all of the arguments. Otherwise, Hillel wins basically every argument. But they have various places in which, you know, they question that as to why that's the case. And so at one point they're discussing one piece of law, and all of a sudden a voice from heaven comes down and says, in Hebrew, Elu ve'elu divrei Elohim chayim, which means both these things that they're saying and these things that they're saying are both words of the living God. Right? So it sounds like this great, you know, everybody's got their perspective thing, and then it's like a comma, and then it says, but the halakha, the law, goes according to Beit Hillel. Okay, so on the one hand, it makes the statement that both what they say are the words of the living God, but in the end, Hillel wins out. Why, they say? Because Hillel was known for being a deferential teacher, so that even when he taught, for example, and he was teaching something in opposition to Shammai's people, they would teach Shammai's position first. In other words, even if they disagreed, they still showed it respect and reverence, whereas it didn't work so much in the reverse of that. So the one sort of dividing line in this whole conversation was about, you know, if everybody has their perspective. Hey, Jared, how you doing? This is the pre-sermon sermon. If everybody has their perspective, and every perspective is to be honored, how do you move forward? And so if you're trying to figure out what distinguishes one from the other, is really just about decorum, right? How one side treats the other. And if one side respects the other's position, even if they disagree with it. So here I was talking to what is now a legislature that I believe has shifted in a very different direction. And so I tried to give all of that as my instructions. And this was, I think, like 2 weeks after October 7th. So it was a whole different universe from when I had accepted the idea of it. And it was interesting, you know, but I think the guy who had the gavel in his hand, you know, everybody sort of looked around and felt like, okay, maybe we're going to be able to legislate together and it will all be fine. And then they all sort of realized by noon that was not going to be the case. Probably not even by lunchtime, that would be over. But for a brief moment, I like to think, right, that that's the case. Yeah. Sorry, give me one thing. That could be my sermon. Marcia just texted, I have to help with the Zoom. Give me 1 second.
You're right. You don't have to. Let's go right to the cookies. Yeah, right to the cookies. They look so good, don't they?
Okay. One of the advantages of real-time text recording.
Dan, last week we were on Zoom, we can't hear it. Has anybody else said that on Zoom?
No, the problem I heard last week was that somebody may have been unmuted and it was overwhelming certain things, so that's always a possibility when you have the unmute thing. But no, more likely, are you guys watching on your iPad? Yeah. Can you bring your iPad next time? I'll take a look at it, because most likely... Yeah, but believe it or not, it can go by settings of the individual Zoom that you're on, and it could be all sorts of other things. Hey, Joseph. Yes, no, yes, it is, because I went and clicked out the thing. Hello. Great to see you guys. Shabbat shalom. Wow, this is really, again, my assumptions about this evening are constantly being challenged. I really thought I was going to be all by my lonesome. So lovely to see you guys. So anyway, you just missed the early sermon, which we'll get to the later sermon later. But I think now, Ellen, we're going to invite you up to help light our Shabbat candles. We're now on page 120 in our Siddur. You can join us there. And Ellen, I'll do the lighting piece. We'll light those sets on the night. Yes, we'll carry it. Yeah, I think they get that. I don't think you have to whisper, right? You know, I think you can, the real worry with all this stuff is that this is hysterical. Yeah, this one might be. Yeah. Here's what we want to do. Do me one favor, just as a back. You just go ask Josie in case we have, I think, other. Yeah, I think we have. Anyway, the light of the game. It is the light of the game. Yes. I'm not taking a candle out of there. I'm not putting it in there. No, this might solve it. Probably true, but at least so far I have. Yeah, I think we need it. It's out of juice. All right. There we go. Teamwork, everybody. Thanks. Amen. Good Shabbos to you, Ellen. Thank you so much. So we'll turn now to page 130. Hope that the rabbi can sing better than he can light candles. I hope you'll join with me again. Very top of the page 130. I appreciate that. Lechu ner hanena, lechu ner hanena, lechu ner hanena ladonai. Lechu ner hanena, lechu ner hanena, lechu ner hanena ladonai. Naria, Naria, letzor yishenu nekadma fanav betoda. Naria, Naria, letzor yishenu bizmirot Naria lo. Lechu ner hanena, lechu ner hanena, lechu ner hanena ladonai. Lechu ner hanena, lechu ner hanena, lechu ner hanena ladonai. We're now on page 131, Shiru Ladonai, which is the middle of the page in Hebrew. Shiru Ladonai, Shiru Shir Chadash, Shiru Ladonai, Kol Haaretz. Shiru ladonai baruchu shemo, basru meyom leyom yeshuato. Shiru ladonai baruchu shemo, basru meyom leyom yeshuato. Shiru ladonai, shiru shir chadash, shiru ladonai kol haaretz. Shiru ladonai baruchu shemo, basru meyom leyom yeshuato. Shiru ladonai baruchu shemo, basru meyom leyom yeshuato. Shabbat shalom, guys. Great to see you. The age quotient just went down in a wonderful direction. Thanks to all of you. As usual, though, make yourselves at home. There isn't a babysitter tonight, but they know where to go in case they want to play a little bit. We're on page 132, Or Zarua, at the very bottom of the page. Or Zarua lahatzadik, ulehishrei lev simcha. Or zaru ala tzadik, ulehishre lev simcha. Simechu tzadikim b'Adonai, vehodu lezecher kodsho. Simechu tzadikim b'Adonai, vehodu lezecher kodsho. We'll turn now to page 134, Zamru Ladonai at the very top of the page. Zamru Ladonai bechinor, bechinor vekol zimra, b'chatzotzrot vekol shofar, ha'ariu lifnei hamelech Adonai, Yiram hayamum lo'o, tevel veyoshvevam, Neharot imcha uchaf yachad, harim yiraneinu, lifnei Adonai kivam, lishmot haaretz, yishmot tevel betzedek, ve'amim b'mesharim. Hiram hayamum lo'o, tevel veyoshvevam, neharot imcha uchaf yachad, harim yiraneinu. Romamu is the last Hebrew paragraph on page 135. Again, page 135, just in the middle of the page. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu vehishtachavu lehar kodsho. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu vehishtachavu lehar kodsho. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu romemu. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu romemu. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu vehishtachavu lehar kodsho. We'll turn now to Lachado D on page 138. We'll do the first, second, fifth, and ninth paragraphs. And for that final paragraph, if you're with us here in the room, we'll rise and face this way, welcoming in the presence of Shabbat. Lechado di likrat kala penei Shabbat nekabela. 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 Shamor v'zachor b'dibur echad, Ishmi'anu el hamiuchad, Adonai echad, u'shemo echad, l'shemo tiferet ve'litila. Lechado di likrat kala, penei Shabbat nekabela. Lechado di likrat kala, penei Shabbat nekabela. Likrat Shabbat lechu v'nelcha, ki hi mekor haberacha, meherosh mikedem nesucha, sof maaseh b'machshava tchila. Lechado di likrat kala, penei Shabbat nekabela. Lechado di likrat kala, B'nei Shabbat nekabela. Fifth paragraph. Hitoreri, Kiva orech kumiori, uri, shir daberi, kevod Adonai alayich nikla. Lecha dodi likrat kalam, Penei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi likrat kalam, Penei Shabbat nekabela. Bohi v'shalom ateret ba'alam, Gam besimcha u'betzol ha, toch emunei am segula, Bohi chala, Lecha dodi likrat kala, Penei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi likrat kala, Penei Shabbat nekabela. Okay, please be seated. We're now on page 140. Tzadik Katamar is the Hebrew just in the middle of the page. Tzadik Katamar Yifrach Keres Balbanon Yiske Shetulim Bevet Adonai Bechatzrot Eloheinu Yafrichu Od Yenuvun Beseva Deshenim Berananim Yehiu Lehagin Ki Ashar Adonai Tzuri Velo Avlatabo. Now rise again in body or spirit for the Chatzi Kaddish on page 144 and will remain standing through the Baruch Hu on the next page. Yitkadal ve'yitkadash shemei Rabbah ve'alma divrach irutei ve'amlich machutei ve'chayechon uvyomechon uvchayei dechol Beit Yisrael ba'galaha Ubizman kari vehimeru. Amen. Yeheshme Rabba mevarach. La'alam li'al me'al maya. Yitbarach. Yitbarach ve'yishtabach. V'yitbar v'yitramam ve'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal. Shemei dekudsha b'richu. Leila min kol birchata ve'shirata. Tushbechata v'nechemata tamihiran be'alma ve'imeru. Amen. Barechu et Adonai hamevorach. Baruch Adonai hamvorach le'olam va'ed. Please be seated. Let's read together in English on the very top of page 149. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, from whom the evening flows. Your wisdom sets the way on which time and season glide. Your breath guides the sail of the stars. Creator of the tide of time and light, you guide the current of day into night. As heaven spans to infinity, you set its course for eternity. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, from whom the evening flows. Umahavir yom umevi laila, Umavdihil ben yom uven lahaila, Adonai tzvahot shemo. El chai v'kayam tamid yimloch aleinu leolam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Amari Varahavim. We'll turn now to the top of page 151, and we'll read together in English, again, very top of the page. As you taught Torah to those whose names I bear, teach me Torah too. Its mystery beckons, yet I struggle with its truth. You meant Torah for me. Did you mean the struggle for me too? Don't let me struggle alone. Help me to understand, to be wise, to listen, to know. Lead me into the mystery. Ki ehem chayenu ve'orech yameinu, uvahem nege yomam v'layla, v'avatcha tasir mimenu li'olamim, baruch atah Adonai, ohev amo Yisrael. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Please join me on page 154. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha, v'chol levavcha, v'chol nafshecha, u'v'chol meodecha, ve'hayu hadvarim ha'ele, asher anochi mitzavcha, hayom al levavecha, ve'shinantam levanecha, ve'dibarta bam, ve'shiftecha b'veitecha, u'v'lechtecha b'derech, Ushochbecha uvkumecha, ushartam leot al yadecha, vehayu letotafot bein einecha, uchtavtam al mezuzot beitecha, uvihisharecha, leman tiskeru vasitem et kol mitzvotai, vitem kedoshim leloechem, ani Adonai Elohechem, Asher hotzeiti etchem mieretz Mitzrayim, liot lachem Elohim, ani Adonai Elohechem, Adonai Elohechem emet. Let's read together in English just on page 155, a little bit different tonight. Love your God with every heartbeat, with every breath, with every conscious act. Keep in mind the words I command you today. Teach them to your children. Talk about them at work. Whether you are tired or you are rested, let them guide the work of your hands. Keep them in the forefront of your vision. Do not leave them at the doorway of your house or outside your gate. They are reminders to do all of my mitzvot so that you can be holy for God. I am Adonai, your God. I led you out of Egypt to become your God. I am Adonai, your God. We turn to Micha Mocha now on the top of page 158. Yabai bai bim 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 bam, yabai bai bim bam, yabai bai bim 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 bam, yabai bai bim bam, yai bai ba 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 bai, yabai bai bim bam, yai bai ba 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 bai, yabai bai bim bam. Micha mocha bai lim Adonai, Micha mocha Nedar b'kodesh, Norat hilot osefele, Norat hilot osefele, Yabai bai bim 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 bam, Yabai bai bim bam, Yabai bai bim 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 bam, Yabai bai bim bam, Yai bai ba 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 bai, Yabai bai bim bam. Yai bai ba 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 bai, ya ba bai bai bim bam. Malachutecha ra'u vanecha, bokeam lifnei Moshe Miriam, zeli anu ve'amru, Adonai yimloch leolam va'ed. V'nemar kifad Adonai et Yaakov, ugolo miad chazak mimenu, baruch atah Adonai, Gal Yisrael. Turn now to page 161 at the very top. Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storms. Adonai, help us to walk with good companions, to live with hope in our hearts and eternity in our thoughts, that we may lie down in peace and rise up, waiting to do your will. Hashkivenu is on the top of page 160. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu leshalom lehamidenu shomreinu lechaim. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu leshalom lehamidenu shomreinu lechaim. Ushmor teteinu uvoeinu lechaim ushalom me'ata ve'ad olam. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu leshalom ve'hamidenu shomreinu lechaim. Blessed are you, Adonai, guardian of Israel, whose shelter of peace is spread over us, over all your people Israel, and over Yerushalayim. Turn now to Vishamar on the top of page 162. Veshamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berhit olam Einai beini uvein bnei Yisrael oti le'olam ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai et hashamayim ve'et haaretz uvayom hashvi Shabbat, Shabbat vayinafash. I invite us now to rise in body or spirit as we begin the Amidah together on page 164. From that point on, we'll continue silently. As always, please go at your own pace, and if at the end you are still standing, you may be seated. Adonai sefatai tifachu fiyagi tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Ose shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel. Yaseh shalom, Shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, Shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. We'll turn now to page 371 as we offer our Misha Berach, our healing prayer this evening. Tonight in our community, we're thinking of Barbara Goldfarb, Abigail Blum, Betsy Tepper, Allison Luckman, Michael Klinghoffer, Ame and Warren Cass, Rivka Bat Rachel, Leah Bat Naomi, Lorraine Danis, David Dowling, Sibia Devora Bat Francis, Muriel Hirsch, Michelle Sawicki, Francis Kirschman, Shelley Newmark, Diane Axelrod, Gabriola Rose Spicer, Barbara Kushner, David Kyle Klopman, Lorraine Davis, Kim Birnbaum, Deborah Block Kroll, Sylvia Orn, Rachel Bat Ora, and Josephine Getling. In addition to those names that we just read, of course, we invite those watching at home to add names as well, and those with us in the room, if you have any names, just raise a hand. We'll start on this side of the room and then to this side if you have anybody you want to share. Again, we'll join together on page 371, just in the middle of the page. Avotenu mekor habracha leimotenu. May the source of strength, who blessed the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Misheberach imotenu mekor habracha lavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen. Now we'll add our prayer for Israel in time of war. Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu, our God and God of our ancestors, you know that the Jewish people are one nation with one heart, and today that heart is broken. O healer of broken hearts, binder of their wounds, be with our brothers and sisters who have been taken captive, and with the families of those victims. Watch over the hostages, break their bonds, and bring them out from darkness to light. As it says in Isaiah, proclaim release to the captives, liberation to the imprisoned. Comfort the families of all those murdered, bring them under the shelter of your wings, bring complete healing of body and spirit to all of the wounded, bind up our wounds and grant us healing. Sur Yisrael v'goalo, rock and redeemer of the people Israel. Bless the state of Israel, the initial manifestation of our redemption. Shield it with your care, spread over it your shelter of peace. Guide its leaders and advisors with your light and your truth, grace them with your good counsel. Strengthen the hands of those who defend our holy land, crown their efforts with victory. Bless the land with peace, its inhabitants with lasting joy. Shomer Yisrael, guardian of Israel, strengthen and bless the defenders of Israel, who stand guard over our land, on the land, in the air, and on the sea. We see the promise of the psalmist who said, you turned my mourning into dancing, my sackcloth into robes of joy. God protect, preserve, and restore peace and well-being to Israel, your people. And together we say, Amen. Well, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. All right. So, speaking of Israel and in happier times, this time of year, there is a holiday that's taking place which for us, especially on nights like this where it is cold and freezing and snowing, feels completely insane. But I know as Ellen, one of our leaders of our Rosh Chodesh group, who will be meeting on Sunday to do what? What holiday are we celebrating now? Tu B'Shvat. Very good. Okay, now Tu B'Shvat. How many of you are big fans, celebrate every year, know everything about it. I'm just going to assume everyone watching at home is doing a similar kind of, trying to hide the hand. That's not accidental. Tu B'Shvat for me as a child, I associate probably not so pleasantly with carob. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with carob, but what they tried to sell us on as kids was that it was an alternative to chocolate, a healthier alternative to chocolate that tasted the same as it. It's very early in my life where I learned not to trust people say about things without verifying for yourself. Let's just say, again, image of something doesn't match up to the realities of it. But Tu B'Shvat actually is a holiday that its origin point is Talmudic Mishnaic, actually. And likely, again, if we're talking of it being Mishnaic, is really much older than that. And the truth is, really comes from various aspects of Torah law that the rabbis then take and craft and create into certain, I think, layers of meaning that we are more familiar with today. But perhaps in the time and in the distance, we lose a little bit of the sense of kind of what was this really all about at the beginning. And the truth is that, for example, what Ellen and our Rosh Chodesh group are going to do, their Seder that they're going to do on Sunday, a Tu B'Shvat Seder, this is a much more recent occurrence. This is really only since the 1600s, give or take, and really is thanks mostly to the Kabbalists who were living in the land of Israel, primarily in Sfat, who, like a lot of things in their era, they took what felt mundane and they made it into something spiritual, and usually deeply spiritual, full of symbolism and layers and all sorts of things. I'm not going to get into any of those things tonight. I assure you it's too complex, and I probably taught it so many times that it would be boring at this point. But suffice it to say, there is this holiday, and the rabbis are really trying to figure out how do we make this meaningful, in particular when we are living in Galut, when we're living in diaspora, when we're living far from the land of Israel, because principally, Tu B'Shvat is a holiday that is tied specifically to things going on in the land of Israel and literally the land itself. So what is the origin point of it, just very quickly? As I said, is Mishnaic. In the beginning of the section of the Mishnah that deals with Rosh Hashanah, which we would associate with, again, what time of year for us is normally fall, right? And what is Rosh Hashanah principally to us? It is a celebration of what? New Year. Great, don't be hesitant, right? You're all right on this so far. Now, there's the part where it gets a little confusing. How many New Years do you believe we have as a people?
I think two.
Good, we got 2 or 3, we got a couple, some looking at me quizzically like, what do you mean more than one? The reality is actually that there are 4 that are described in the Mishnah, and I believe there's a 5th too that comes from a different place. Yeah, and it might surprise you to know that the first one that's listed is not the one that we associate with Rosh Hashanah being the one that happens after the month of Elul, the month of Tishrei at the beginning, but it's actually one that begins in the month of Nisan. Nisan is when another holiday takes place, and this one's a real deep cut. Any guesses? It is a springtime holiday. Very good, Passover. Really? So Passover is the first one they talk about, right? 4 days of the year that serve as a new year, as a Rosh of Shana, Rosh Shanim. Each has a different purpose, and the one in Nisan is the New Year for kings. So what it meant was basically, and this is not an uncommon thing if you study, for example, in European history, I believe also probably in most Islamic history, a lot of times the way that people judged the time, the year you lived in, was by the year of the reign of the current sovereign, whoever they were, right? Or it may be, 2024, but if we lived in those days, it would be, the first year of the reign of King Charles. Something along those lines, right? So coronations and how long a king or a queen ultimately reigned was determined in the month of Nisan, which makes a certain kind of sense, again, because if our origin point as a nation is around Passover, right, that you have this sort of national holiday, and it seems like a logical time in which these kind of coronations and the judging of time would take place. You have another one in Elul, which is the month before Rosh Hashanah. That's for tithing animals. We won't get into too much of that, but it will come back around in a second. We have the one we're familiar with, right? The first of Tishrei, the beginning of. This is just to make it confusing, this is the new year of years. Okay, what we celebrate in the fall is the new year of years. So when we count out, you hear me say the new year is 57, 80, be next year 85. Okay, that is the celebration of that year. It is also the point in which they determine when the sabbatical years begin, when the Jubilee years begin. So it really becomes what we're familiar with, which is sort of a delineation of time itself in its own way, and it goes back to at least what the rabbis believed was the origin point of creation. But then we get to our 4th on the list, which is the one that we are thinking about, and it's coming up this week, this holiday that is known as Tu B'Shvat. Okay, but in the beginnings, it is not yet Tu B'Shvat. We just know that it's in the month of Shvat. Shvat is a good Hebrew month to know, hard to pronounce, but important to know. But there's a disagreement. Okay, and that's where I really want to focus my attention. There is a disagreement. For those that may remember from the pre-sermon sermon at the beginning of our service, there are two rabbis who were known for arguing with each other constantly, disagreeing with each other constantly. Anybody remember the names? Very good. We got a Hillel. What's the other guy's name? See, this is the challenge of losing continuously as people start to forget your name. But Shammai was a great rabbi. He didn't lose because he was wrong. The rabbis really teach that a lot of his rulings lost because they were the more stringent. And that generally speaking, all right, 2 seconds aside, when the Mashiach comes according to the tradition, right, the Messiah comes, Messianic age, it flips. So where Rabbi Hillel's teachings are primary in this era, where we as human beings, let's just say, we're not necessarily always going to live our best ways. We need things that are a little bit more lenient because we're going to make more mistakes. In the time of the Mashiach, when everybody is behaving appropriately, the laws of Shammai actually come into effect because they are the more strict. They're really the ones that we probably should be following, but because we tend not to be able to keep to the ideal, Hillel is our guy because it includes a certain amount of humanity in it. Okay, but in any case, they disagree. So Shammai says that and really in the end, this new year that we're talking about is the new year of trees. Okay, it's the point in which we're counting when a tree existed or didn't exist, mainly for the purposes of determining are the products of that tree usable for self? Must they be donated to the poor, or must they be donated ultimately to the temple? And the way that they determined which direction the apple tree's apples are supposed to go has to do with which year you are in a particular cycle. So the only way they could know that is to have a cutoff point and to say any tree that produces its fruit or is planted before a certain point, it counts as last year. Anything after this point, it counts as next year. So that's really what Tu B'Shvat is in its beginning. It's really a line in the sand in order to determine whether whatever we've planted is now part of this year's cycle in the present or last year's cycle. Okay, seems simple enough. But then we have this disagreement. So Shammai says it should really be the first of that month of Shvat. And then Hillel says that it should be Tu B'Shvat, right? The letters Tet and Vav in Hebrew amount to the number 15. So it's a difference between should it be at the beginning of the month or on the 15th day. So the question we should logically ask ourselves now is what?
I'm asking why.
There you go. That's it. It's not any more complicated than that. Everybody's looking for the more complicated. What? Why? Why? First of all, why is there this in the first place? Second of all, why is there an argument over this? 15 days, right? 15 days. What does that matter in the grand scheme of things? What could it possibly matter? So here comes another teaching of another great rabbi, Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva himself is a fascinating story. He doesn't start studying Torah until he's 40. He comes from actually a family of converts. He originally has nothing to do with it. His wife is the one who tells him he should go and study, and then he becomes one of the great sages of all time. Meets an ignoble end, unfortunately, at the hands of the Romans because he supports a rebellion of Bar Kokhba, which they lose, and he is, well, I won't describe it now, but it's not a pleasant end for Akiva. But in his lifetime, he is considered one of the great sages of all time. And the story is told of him in which he goes and he picks an etrog. An etrog is used in what holiday? We're going to go keep testing around. What's our... Very good. Ellen is really beating the crowd tonight. That's why she's one of our leaders of the Rosh Chodesh. Right? So it happens to he picks an etrog on the first of Shvat. But he does this, and instead of setting aside one tithe, he sets aside two. Why is that the case? Well, because he's not quite sure what to do. The Gemara explains. This occurred in the second or the fifth year of the sabbatical cycle. In the second and fifth years, one sets aside second tithe. This is called, I'm always forgetting, Maseh Sheni. Okay, the second tithing, which only happens in these particular years. Whereas in the third and the sixth years, one sets aside the tithing ultimately for the poor, for the people who were going to feed in the years where they're necessary to feed. So Rabbi Akiva, right, not being certain, sets aside both the second tithe and the tithing for the poor people as well, because he has this doubt of the halacha. One tithe, he says, was in accordance with the statement of Beit Shammai, that the new year for trees is on the first of Shvat, in which case it was already the third or sixth year when one must set aside for the poor. And one tithe was in accordance with the statement of Beit Hillel, that the new year for trees is on the 15th, so it was the second or fifth year by that standard, which must set aside for the Maseh Sheni, which goes to the temple. Okay? So why again, I keep going back to the why question, why does any of this matter? Why is the rabbi teaching me this? This doesn't seem like a terribly relevant thing. In the end, we know it's Tu B'Shvat, right? It's not, the Shammai doesn't win. So I think there is something deeper here, and I think the rabbis sort of intuit it as well. Here you have one of the great rabbis of history, presumably should know every halacha, every piece of Jewish law, certainly one as straightforward as this one, especially considering the fact that Akiva is generations after Hillel and Shammai, where we assume the matter has been settled. And yet there's something that's biting at him, right? He stands there and he realizes, I could easily just go with the normative practice here, assume that this is a case in which, Beit Hillel is correct, I'll tithe according to Hillel, Shammai was wrong, I have nothing to do with that anymore, and I should be fine. But that little piece of him that says, I can't leave this to chance. This may seem like a simple matter to everybody else, but it actually is of great, profound nature if you really think about the way that the rabbis structured their lives, the way they thought about every single thing that was grown in the land of Israel. Every concept of rabbinic thinking when it relates to the land of Israel in particular is that it is a gift given, that there is no ownership of it by technical standards. It's God leasing it to us with a responsibility to care for it, which means that every single thing that is produced on that land has not just a spark of divinity in it, but it has a purpose. And that each of these systems that they've put in place are not just for the sake of having ritual or for doing the same thing year in, year out, or for even marking the passage of time. They are mitzvot that are designed to try to help engender in the person a sense, first of all, of gratitude, by the fact that you have a piece of fruit in your hand, be grateful that you have that and can eat it. Second, a stewardship of the land itself, a responsibility to care for not just what is produced, but the thing that produces it itself, even if it's an inanimate tree, that we treat it with the same kind of respect that we consider all of these other elements. And that our laws, especially as relate to when we give up the things that we otherwise have grown, engenders in our people a sense, again, that we don't just grow for self, we don't just build our wealth for our own purposes, we don't just focus on our amassing of stature or power or position, that when everything is working properly, when everything is functioning, especially in the land of Israel, the way that it ought to, that really the life is determining, right, what are we growing this year? Is it going to grow properly? If we have a wonderful crop, how are we going to share that bounty, either with those who are in need or with the central authorities of our religious people so that they can continue their holy work? For Rabbi Akiva, these aren't small factors. He's not just thinking along the way, and rather than take the simple route, which most of us would do, right? Pick one, assume the normative one is the one to follow, and do it. But he does both because he doesn't even want to take the chance of being wrong about something like this. I mean, here we're talking about even an etrog is not an edible thing, right? We use it for ritual purposes. In order to eat it, you have to do all sorts of things to it. And even then, it's not the first choice, okay? And at least in this case, the story is describing him picking the etrog not necessarily in conjunction with Sukkot, just happened to be sort of walking by. But his whole line of thinking from the beginning is, here I am generations later, I'm thinking about my predecessors who argued with each other over these small points, and who even when one of them wins the argument, we retain both teachings because both of them had merit, both of them had reasons, and they had logic. And that if we, for example, want to live our best selves, that we have to live a life that is constantly thinking about that which we are grateful for, that which we owe to our Creator, that which we owe to our community, that which we owe ultimately to our sense of self, and what our land and our identity as people means to us. And so again, in happier times, this is a holiday in Israel that is, the first one that was done pre-state Israel, I looked it up today, it was 1882 or 1880, about the time when our congregation came into existence. The first modern day celebration of Tu B'Shvat took place in Zichron Yaakov, which is sort of not far from Haifa. It was one of the first settlements in the land of Israel prior to the land of Israel itself. When they were gathering around and they created a ritual around planting trees, they had a vision in their mind of what that might look like, 100, 120, 140 years later, as it goes. The land of Israel now completely is a different geography than it was in so many ways. The land itself is radically changed from what it was in that period of time, in which a lot of it was arid or swamp infested, malaria infested, unusable. And slowly but surely that commitment to the land itself, especially by those early pioneers as they were, the ones I'm teaching about in my class, every seed they planted, every tree they grew, every piece of fruit that they ate, they had a sense of gratitude for what that meant, not just for them, but symbolically what that meant for our people to be able to grow those things again in our own land. So especially right now when there is a dark cloud over every conversation, every thinking we have, every moment our heart breaks thinking about what's going on in Israel right now, we have to also come back to these sort of touchstone moments and remember that the vision of our country, the vision of our land, is this vision of a world overflowing with bounty, one in which people are grateful for what they have and what they share with each other. And we may not necessarily be in that moment right now, but we come back to it and we celebrate it with a full heart, even when we ourselves, again, are living in the middle of winter where the last thing we can be thinking about is being grateful for new trees and fruit and all the various delicious things that you'll probably eat on Sunday. And to me, there's so much nuance, so much layered love in stories like this, which, even if you study Talmud regularly, you could read past this without thinking twice about it. Because in the end, if your whole focus of Talmud study is to figure out what was the end result and what halacha to follow, there are books for that. There are many generations later, there are plenty of them. But studying Talmud is very rarely about that. It's really about exploring the possibilities that exist within our world and coming to conclusions, yes, but also holding on to the fact that sometimes there is beauty to be found in the disagreements. And rather than perhaps skewing to one side or the other, we follow Akiva and say, you know what? There's merit in both directions. So I'm going to treat them both with respect and I'm going to act accordingly. And I'm going to make sure that I'm going to tithe and set aside, both assuming that, Shammai's right and it's, the coming year, or Hillel and it's the previous year. Either way, right, it's not going to be left for chance. So I don't know whether that gives you any greater connection to Tu B'Shvat. I don't know whether you can go and plant any trees in Sag Harbor this coming week. But if you're part of Rosh Chodesh, I think you will enjoy yourselves on Sunday, certainly. And for those that know very little about Tu B'Shvat, I tell you, on the internet, in certain places, you can find some wonderfully interesting things. And trust things like My Jewish Learning or Sefaria, or those are places I would tend to go. But you'd be amazed at what the rabbis take from this little kernel of an idea, which really is more of an accounting holiday than anything else, and turn it into something that actually has become quite meaningful for a lot of people. Yes, Ellen, question.
Where does the idea come from that the land is Jubilee year, I think,
Mm-hmm.
the land has the life fallow? Where does that come from?
That, luckily, of a handful of things is Torah. It's all Torah. The rabbis make all sorts of other rulings about it, but we'll come to it in a little bit and it's repeated again in Deuteronomy. But I'll give you a heads up when we study it. It's actually, for whatever reason, like half of the B'nai Mitzvah that I've had in the 10 years I've been here have all been that one particular portion. It's Parshat Emor, if I remember correctly, is the first time it appears. But very strict rules about it. The real trick, Ellen, more than anything else, is figuring out what year one is to count from. That's always the challenge. But believe it or not, they're still counting, and they could tell you when the sabbatical year or the Jubilee year is, 10,000 years from now, just the way that our calendar works. So, good question, though, for sure. I don't remember exactly where we are. I think there was a sabbatical pretty recently, mostly because I remember giving a sermon about it. But enough sermons in one night. You've already gotten more than a few. We'll turn to page 586 at the very bottom of our page, and we'll rise in body or spirit. And page 586, Aleinu l'shabeach, at the very bottom of the page. Aleinu l'shabeach l'Adon hakol, latet gedula liotzer breshit, shelo asanu kegoye ha'aratzot, velo samanu kemishpechot ha'adama, shelo sama chelkenu kahem, vegor aleinu kechol hamonam, vanachnu korim umishtachavim umodim, Lifnei Melech Malchei Hamlachim Hakadosh Baruch Hu V'nemar V'haya Adonai Lemelech Al Kol Haaretz Bayom Hahu Yeh Adonai Echad Ushemo Echad. Now I invite those in mourning, those observing yahrzeit, to please remain standing. Everyone else may be seated at this time. We think first of those who passed in our community in recent months: Isabel Becker, Bert Bitterman, Julian Busgang, Morty Schwatzky, Deborah Fogarty, Richard Gambino, Jerry Goldsmith, Dr. Sam Gould, Rita Hertzfeld, Sean Leibowitz, Samuel Moskowitz, Jeffrey Nagelberg, Barbara Strasser, Fania Verrett, and David Weinstein. We also marked the yard sites that occurred during the last week for Samuel Benziner, George Berger, Elaine Grossman, Mildred Heimowitz, Olive Hennefield, Ruth Hesse, Esther Hirsch, James Hose, George Katz, Hannah Klein, Joseph Lauder, Isabel Lewontin, Mark Mitchum, Jay Morris, Michael Neustadter, Diana Oliphant, Theodore Pearl, Millie Peskowitz, Estelle Posner, Louis Sigmund Rosenthal, Murray Rudman, Alan Saltzman, Francis Sokolsky Suskind, Sylvia Swerdlick, Cindy Robin Taylor, Adrian Wohl, and Mark Zimmerman. In addition to those names that we just read, is anyone else saying Kaddish for anyone we did not mention? Of course, and remember all the lives that have been taken in Israel as well. And I'll invite the mourners to join with me on page 598. And if it's your custom, you may rise or remain seated, whatever, again, is your custom. Page 598. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, be'alma divra chirutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agala u'v'zman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shemei Rabbah mevarach la'alam u'yalmei almaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yithadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal shemei dekudsha b'richu. Leila min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, damiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shalama Rabbah min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Zichronam livracha, may every one of their memories be for a blessing. Okay, please be seated, and again, Shabbat Shalom to everyone. Just a few quick announcements before we end our service tonight. First is to join us for Shabbat services tomorrow morning. That'll be at 10 o'clock. You can join us live here at the temple, or of course online on YouTube, on our website, or on Zoom. And of course, we welcome everyone to Torah study at 12 o'clock following services tomorrow. Again, that's available both live here or on our hybrid on Zoom as well. We want to thank our anti-Semitism committee. Last night's program was really quite informative, hard to hear certainly, but one that was focused again on anti-Semitism in your neighborhood, our collective neighborhood. And David White from the ADL was quite informative. And, you know, again, these are tough conversations, but I appreciate very much the hard work of pulling that meeting together, and to our co-chairs, Lauren Tepper, Julie Tatcon, Kent, and Ann Silver, and who are always looking for others to join them. They usually have their meetings, I believe, on Tuesday evenings, but if you're interested in joining up or learning more about the committee, please let us know in the office and we'll make that connection. We'll also remind everyone that this Sunday, 2 o'clock here at the temple, the Rosh Chodesh Women's Group meeting, this time focusing again on the holiday of Tu B'Shvat, and will be led by Arlene Auerbach, Dr. Arlene Auerbach. And again, that is this Sunday at 2. Tu B'Shvat, just so they're aware, is Thursday, beginning Wednesday night into Thursday in Israel. Also, this Wednesday evening, January 24th at 7 o'clock, you can register for a fun adult evening of Kabbalah coloring with Lee Rifkin. No prior experience necessary. I should add, probably no experience or talent for drawing, from what I'm told, because I'm told even I can come to this. So hopefully you'll join us again Wednesday at 7 o'clock. That'll be here at the temple. And also a reminder, every Sunday at 9:30, our lay-led minyan that is happening only on Zoom. It's in response to the war in Israel, and the Zoom link can be found in the temple email. It goes out on Thursdays and Fridays as well. I also have regards to you from Cantor Kevin. He hasn't forgotten all about you, I promise, but he is very much in the search for his first official job out of school. So we wish Kevin the best of luck. He's applying to a number of different congregations around the country, and you know, he's for those who don't know who I'm talking about, he is our most recent student intern, and here at the temple, we have a long history of really wonderful student cantorial interns from HUC. Thanks very much to this man sitting right here, Neil, who won't take credit, but all of the good ones are really all because of Neil and Morris Kramer, and Kevin is certainly one of those. So we'll slowly start to say goodbye to him, and we will begin the process of finding our next student cantor in a couple months. I guess Neil got some work to do, but in the meantime, he sends his best regards, and he'll either be back with us next Shabbat or the week after. And hopefully by then we'll have all sorts of news. So with that, I think those are all of my announcements. Anything I forgot? Neil? No? Nothing? I will say, though, and I think I forgot to send it out, but I believe there is a digital way of watching it. This Wednesday morning in New York City is going to be Cantor Lauren's practicum, which is in her 4th year at HUC. This is what the Cantor students go through and how they, work through material and learn about it and teach about it. And usually it's streamed, so I'll find out if anybody wants to watch it. But I'm going to go and be there in person to support her, and I'm sure she's going to do a great job. And she sends her best to everybody else. So with that, I think tonight we'll end with Adon Olam before we do Kiddush. And Adon Olam is on page 625. Again, page 625, the very top of the page. Adon Olam asher malach beterem kol yetzir nivra liet nasa bechefzo kol azai melech shemo nikra be'acharei kichlot hakol levado yimloch nora Vehu haya, vehu hove, vehu yeh betifara, vehu echad, ve'en sheni, lehamshir lo, lehachmira, beli reheshit, beli tachlit, velo haoz, vehamisra, vehu eli, vechai goali, Betzor chevli be'et zahara, vehu nisi umanos li, menat kosi beyom nekra, beyado avkid ruchi, beit ishan ve'aira, ve'im ruchi geviati, Adonai li, Velo Iram. We'll rise for Kiddush on page 123. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam b'holrei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu v'shabbat kodsho b'ahava uvratzon inchilanu Zikaron lemahaseh v'reishit, ki hu yom techila lemikrae kodesh, zecher letziat Mitzrayim, ivanu v'acharta, ve'otanu kidashta, mikol hamim, ve'shabbat kodshecha, Le'ahava uvratzon inchatanu, Baruch atah Adonai, mekadesh haShabbat. Amen. Chaim. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, hamahotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Please come next door for Oneg Shabbat. Services tomorrow, 10 o'clock. All right. A few different reasons. Shabbat Shalom, guys. It's great to see you. So I'm going to see Wendy this week, hopefully when I'm down at HUC, and it sounds like we're going to make that work. That'll be really, really cool. That was just very sweet the other night, and thanks again for bearing with me. That was it. Get home safe. Shabbat Shalom, guys. Short answer is a bunch of stuff that they really make up and makes it sound like it's something important. But if I remember correctly, in the temple, there was something called the shofar. So they would basically put like bread out on the table and 2 loaves of these 2 bread. But I think there's another reason, and something to, the feminine and masculine presence of God and like all that like Kabbalistic, but if you ask me, why have 1 loaf when you can have 2? You get 100 people. Let's feed them. I'll get you a more rabbinic answer than that. the case with Ron?
No, I came up